Okay, welcome to the broadcast. My name is John Mayfield, the real estate tech guy, and we are going to hopefully be broadcasting very shortly here. I had some issues with that last stream. I kind of turned things on so it would go, and it said we had an error. Let me go over to this right here. So it looks like you can see me okay, and should be broadcasting loud and clear here. Okay, I think we're going. So good. And I am going to jump over here, and I'm going to go right out here to this screen here, so you should be able to see my desktop. And thanks again for joining. My apologies that we had some technical difficulties there. And if you want to type something in the chat room, I'll know you're there. I'll take a look at go out there in a second and make sure that you can all hear me okay. So want to quickly go over a few things as I like to do with each new class. And first of all, thank you if you're a new student. We appreciate, we've had a lot of students sign up, so hopefully we've got some new students on the call. And I just want to point out something really quick for you. If you go to Google and you type in Global Real Estate School podcast, okay? That will take you to where you can go to Podbean, or iTunes is down here as well somewhere. Looks like that's Global Real Estate School. But if you're an iTunes person, here it is right down here. You can go right here and you can subscribe to our podcast right here at iTunes. It's a little bit challenging to find us on iTunes. So if you go to iTunes and you search for Global Real Estate School, you won't find us, okay? So just go to Google and type in Global Real Estate School podcast. Now, I always like to start out at the beginning of the YouTube video to give you a couple of quick tips. And one reason I want you to subscribe to that and download the podcast, listen to those. First of all of the recorded sessions I've done, the live video are there. So if you drive back and forth to work, if you want to go out and go for a walk or you exercise, you can listen to the podcast. But secondly, when I hear about something new that has been seen on the real estate exam, I normally put it on the podcast. So it's very good for you to subscribe, to listen, because you'll get the latest information there of what people are seeing on the exam. Same way with their YouTube channel. So I'm going to show you that here in just a minute. Definitely want to subscribe to both of those and watch those, because you'll get timely information. It's just a little challenging for me to go in and make changes inside the course on a regular basis, because it does some weird things if some students are in a specific module or chapter. Now, I do make some updates to the chapters, but just want you to be sure and subscribe to the podcast and to the YouTube channel. So again, easiest way to find it, go to Google, type in Global Real Estate School podcast, okay? Global Real Estate School podcast, okay. So I wanted to give you that information, first of all. And the second thing I want to show you is, if you do go to YouTube, just search for Global Real Estate School and be sure and subscribe to our channel. So when you come out to Global Real Estate School, you can see, even though this was 1 year ago, this is a session I did, and these are still very timely and very good. So just click on John Mayfield. It'll bring you over here, and then you can just subscribe right up there. Okay, wanted to show you that. Last thing I want to show you before we get started, and I didn't have that on. Let me go back over here. My apologies. I'll go back out there very quickly. Go to YouTube and type in Global Real Estate School. I forgot, as Steve Martin would say when he was pulled over for speeding, two words, officer, I forgot. But here are some videos that you'll see that I've done. And again, just select my name right here. And then when you come out here, you can just subscribe to the YouTube channel. So there are tons of videos, lots of playlists. I had one of my students, and all the podcasts end up over here as well. Now you can also go to Global Real Estate School where you purchased the course, and I have the YouTube channel linked right over here. So you can get to all of the YouTube channels there as well. So, and you can actually listen to the podcast here because all of those come over as well. So I just wanted to show you that. I think I had this up when I did the Google. Just be sure and search for Global Real Estate School podcast from Google, and you'll be able to find us on Podbean or iTunes. So just wanted to show you that. Last thing I want to show you very quickly here is in your course library. Now I'm using Missouri. I know we have some South Dakota folks on the line and some folks from Indiana and Oklahoma, Kansas. Even though I have Missouri opened up, it works the same way for all of you. When you open this up, there's a little drop down arrow right over here on the left hand side. If you close that, you will notice that you have additional modules down below. Okay? There's plenty of practice exam questions. The study sessions, those are recorded. So all of those are there. I have a Real Estate Math Made Easy, and the review modules are right there. So that's where you can go into the review modules, and they're open, they're free, you can jump around wherever you want. So you do not want to review in the main course. You want to do that from the review modules. And again, whenever you log into the dashboard, this arrow is going to be pointing down. So what you need to do is close that and just look below, and you will see all of your other courses that are there and information. And then don't forget the additional references. The course textbook is here. Your digital flashcards for your phone are here. The Missouri or the whatever state you're in, the rules and regulations are there for each state. And this handbook, which is very important for all of the states, is there. And that gives you your information about taking the exam, where to call. You can order a sample practice exam and so much more right from there. So again, that's under the additional references. Okay, I just wanted to go over that because I had a girl send me an email yesterday, bless her heart, and she's like, I need some more help with some math. And there's lots of math on those YouTube videos. There's lots of math in the study sessions, so don't forget that. Just wanted to point that out. And then it seems like weekly, and I think I go over this in the very first video, but I totally understand. There's a lot of information, and it's easy to forget. But a lot of people always ask, hey, where do I go to sign up for the exam, or how do I call or contact? And that's in that candidate handbooklet that's in the additional references. So just wanted to point those out. Okay, we're going to get started. I'm going to quickly take a look to see if we have any I'm going to see if we have any questions out there. Carol says hi, and Teresa says hi. Hello, thanks for that. Anybody else? Now, if you have a question about anything, just type that in, and I can come back to this, and I'll look at that from time to time. So feel free to do that, okay? And this is kind of a conversation. I want you to know I want to just be able to talk to you like as if we were in a classroom. I want to be able to answer your questions, but I want to more importantly go over topics that you might see on the exam. All right, let's get started. So I was kind of torn between, do I want to go into one of the modules and work through a module with you and go through some of that information, or do I want to go through some exam questions? So you know what? We might do a combination of both of those today, okay? So I'm going to pull up, I'm going to remember the review modules are where? I close this arrow and I go down below, and the review modules are right there. So if I open that up, I see all the review modules, and these are unlocked. So we can jump around and move anywhere we want to within the module. So let's go into, why don't we go into chapter 11? I think that might be a good review module for us here. And I'm going to put that on the screen. Now, whenever I'm going into a review module, instead of hitting resume, I just hit restart. Now, if you're in the main course, you may not want to do that, but I think it's always really a pretty good idea for you to do that from the main course. So I'm going to work something here. My apologies. We're doing a I'm trying to, give me 1 second here because I want to be able to try to do and for some reason it isn't. Let's see if we can try that. There we go. That's what I wanted to do there. Well, I wanted to get my picture up higher. I'll try that again here. There we go. How about that? All right. Now I think we're ready to go. Good. I just thought that might be good. I'd like to be able to talk to you and look at you as we go through the material together. So. All right, so I'm going to go through chapter 11. This chapter is on listings. We'll take go through this for a little bit, and then what I think we'll do is do some exam questions that I have. Now, do not panic if you're a brand new student and you say, wait a minute, I'm only on chapter 1, and you're jumping to chapter 11. It's not going to hurt you at all, okay? Just take some good notes. And when you get to chapter 11, you know, it's going to make it a lot easier for you. But don't panic because you haven't gone through this. So let's take a look at chapter 11. It's on listing agreements. I have some of the objectives here that we could go through. But remember, this is unlocked, so I can jump down. So I'm just going to go right down to the listing agreement. Now, one of the things we talk about in the course when you go through chapter 10 is this thing called agency. And really it's kind of interesting as real estate professionals. And think about this. This is pretty huge, I think. You and I are basically helping consumers with one of the biggest financial decisions they will ever make in their life. I mean, really, it's a big deal. You know, I've bought and sold a lot of property over my real estate career. I got my license in 1978 at the age of 18. And just a couple of quick stories. In 1981 or 83, I'd graduated from college, and I came back home. I'm living with my parents, and I'm like, you know, if I'm going to sell real estate, I need to buy a home. It's just what I kind of thought. And so, but I was wanting to move to LA. I'm living in Flat River, Missouri, which is a small little community, and I'm selling real estate. I'm single, I'm 23. And so I wanted to move to LA. I love broadcasting and film, and I love writing. And, you know, that's why I like doing these kinds of things for you guys, because I just enjoy all of the behind the scenes part. But I also like some of in front of the camera as well. But I wanted to move to LA. So I remember buying my first home. I spent all of my savings fixing it up, and I thought I'll just put it back up for sale. I was flipping houses long before HGTV, okay? First in the first couple of days, I had 3 offers on my property. And I remember, selling the house, but I remember that the very first showing I had, I remember sitting around that night and I never heard back from the showing agent. And I was thinking to myself, well, gosh, I wonder what the people thought. I mean, I haven't heard any word from the other agent. And, it dawned on me that when we show property, that seller is expecting some feedback, that it's a big deal for them. And so I learned a lot about what sellers go through when they're selling a home. And so, I've done this for years, and then I won't bore you with some of the detours I had, but I sold my office in '06, went to work for a bank. They had some things, the economy tanked, and I won't go into all of that, except to say that they weren't able to put a bank in Farmington, and I'm basically unemployed with a non-compete clause, and my wife and I owned a pick-your-own blueberry blackberry farm. We had a late spring freeze, lost our crop. So, I'm $1 million in debt, have no job, no income, the economy's tanking. And I get paid to tell this story now, and I paid everybody back, but I remember, really having a tough time to kind of limp along and pay everybody back. And so we had this one really nice home here in Farmington. The renters moved out. My wife and I moved in there and started slowly putting the house back together. Now, I tell you that story to say, through all of that turmoil and trials and tribulations, my credit got banged up, okay? I mean, I paid everybody back. I didn't file bankruptcy, but through that time period, I was working with my creditors and different folks to pay people back. And so we just were not in a position to buy and sell real estate like we had for so many years. Still owned a few pieces of rental property. So last December, my wife and I decided to put our house up for sale and sell it. I had not done that for quite a while. And what I want you to understand is it was a nightmare. And I shouldn't say a nightmare, but it was nerve-wracking for me and for my wife. And I remember telling her, I do this for people every day. And it reminded me of what people go through when you buy or sell a home. Now, I know that's a big, long, drawn scenario, but I just want you to know, from my perspective of someone who does this day in and day out for other people, when all of a sudden I became an active party in the situation, it was very, very traumatic. And I want you to understand that you shouldn't take this career path or this profession you are going into lightly, because people are relying on you. When they hire you as their agent, they need your help, and they expect certain things from you and your broker. And so this slide talks about our fiduciary duties to our client. Now, it's very important that you remember the word client, because I'm going to draw some things out here for you on my iPad so that you understand this. But a listing agreement creates what we call a fiduciary obligation, okay? It creates this client-agent relationship. Now, it's the listing agreement that creates this. It is very important that you remember that the listing agreement, and I want you to write this down for me, the listing agreement is between the broker and the client, or the principal, the seller, or it could be a buyer. And that's confusing because I think there's a Carol that's out there right now that's watching. Carol says, well, wait a minute, wait a minute, I'm getting the listing. I'm the one that knows these people. It's not my broker. Shouldn't that listing be between me and my friends, the sellers? Well, John said, and the law says, the listing is between the seller and the broker. So recently, I heard about a question that I can't say I have seen questions, but there are times we get to look at the exam from time to time. It's been a long time, but I hear about questions, okay, from people. And there's a question that said the agent was very good friends with the sellers. They'd known each other for years. He got the listing. 2 days later, he got mad at the broker and left. Can he take that listing with him? The answer is no. Why? Because listings are between who? They are between the broker and the client, so don't forget that. So we get this fiduciary obligation. Now I'm going to throw my screen on here so we can take a look at this. I'll need to type this number in that's going to pop up on the screen. Hopefully here in a second. There it is. So I'm going to pull up an app here so that we can draw for this. Let's do a new paper here. Okay. So I'm going to take my screen off here. There we go. Just so we can kind of concentrate on this. So we're talking about this fiduciary obligation. Let me put a different color than that. And it creates this thing called COALD. I've also seen people call it old car. You could mean it, you could remember it either way. I've always used this COLD, and it talks about care, obedience, accounting, loyalty, and disclosure. Okay, obedience, care, obedience, accounting, loyalty, disclosure. You can see obedience, loyalty, disclosure, care, accountability, and I think the R, I'll have to look that up, but the R stands for, I have to look that up. But I think these are the terms. This is how I've always taught this, and I think you can understand it in this specific way. So keep in mind, we have a broker, and the broker has salespeople. And so out here are the consumers. Now let's just say we have a seller, and this salesperson works with this seller. When they sign the listing agreement, you need to remember that the listing agreement is between the broker and the seller. Now, the salesperson is an agent for the broker, and all of these fiduciary obligations fall underneath both the broker and the salesperson. So let's talk about that for just a second. We talk about the care. Well, you need to use due care when you take photographs, when you get measurements, when you put the information in the MLS. all of those things. I mean, you need to price the property correctly. You need to take due care in running comparables, making sure that the property is priced adequately. You need to be obedient to the seller. You know, I'm showing a property. I can give you example after example after example, and I do not want any of my global real estate school students to do this. But there have been many times when I've shown a property and the other agent will just tell me stuff about their client, and I'm working for the buyer, they're working for the seller, and then they're telling me they need to sell the home, they're about to lose it, and or whatever, they've moved, and you know, making 2 house payments is just such a burden, and oh, I think they'd take this offer. That you've got to keep your mouth quiet unless the client gives you authorization to make that statement. But probably that rarely happens, okay? So who are you obedient to? Your client, okay? Who are you? And that obedience goes along with loyalty. Are you being very loyal to your client if you disclose things that shouldn't be disclosed? Same way with disclosure. If I get an offer from you, and let's just say my house is listed for $100,000. You bring me an offer for $90,000, and you say, "Hey John, I know it's $90,000, but my buyers love your listing. They told me they'll pay the full price, but we wanted to see what they would do on this $90,000." Now, when I go out to present that to my clients and I say it's $90,000 and they say, "Oh, where do we sign?" Am I supposed to disclose that information the other agent told me? Absolutely. I remember showing a house and the other agent told me what he knew they would take for a price. It was quite a bit less. Now, I'm working for a buyer's agent. He's working as a seller's agent. But if you look here on the thing I drew out, if he's working for the seller and I'm working for the buyer, where should my loyalty be? My loyalty should be with the buyer. And he just gave me information, and what should I do? I should disclose that to my client. So that's where this care, obedience, accounting, loyalty, disclosure comes into play. Whenever you enter into an agency relationship, there are some big burdens that you owe your client, okay? And so don't forget COLD, C-O-A-L-D. Very important for you to remember that. Okay, so I'm going to go back over here to just the screen here. I've got that working right now, so I think we're on a roll. Now, don't forget though, listings are between who? They're between the broker and the client. Trust me, you will see a question that's going to look so much and make you feel so sympathetic for the agent, and they leave the company or they die. And the question, normally it's when they leave the company, and they're going to say, where can they take that listing with them? And the answer is no. Why? Because listings are between the broker and the client. So don't forget that. So a signed listing agreement creates a special agency. A special agency. You could very well see a question on that. A special agency is for one specific purpose. So a listing contract is usually a written contract between the seller, the principal, and the agent, the broker. It's a personal service contract. Now again, I highlight here because you will see this question on the test. All listings are between the broker and the seller, not the salesperson. The salesperson still has fiduciary duties, but the listings are between the broker and the salesperson. Okay, so we have a question on the other next slide. Salesperson dies. What happens to the listing agreement? Stays with the broker. It's still valid because listings are between the broker and the seller. Now, here's a little disclaimer I need to give you, because sometimes I get carried away using the listing agreements in the material. I do mention this, but I want to just drive the point home. A buyer's agency agreement is a listing agreement between the buyer and the broker. It's just called a buyer's agency agreement. We call a listing agreement and a listing, agreement, or we'll talk about the different types of listing agreements, but it's a seller's agency agreement or a buyer's agency agreement. They're both personal service contracts. They are both special agencies, but they are between the broker and the client, whether that would be a buyer or a seller. So don't forget that. You're going to see that on the test, and nobody from my school should miss that, okay? And I kind of, I guess, do a little bit of talking here. Now I'm going to see if there are any questions very quickly out here. So Carol's asking a question here. When you are aware of a latent defect, how is that disclosed to a buyer? Well, that's interesting, and let me bring up my book here, Carol. Thank you for that question, too. This makes it more interactive and fun. So I'm going to go over here. And Carol, latent defects has been seen on the exam, okay? So a latent defect, let's talk about this. This is from John Riley's book, and I love Mr. Riley. I've been using his books for years. He's an attorney and a very respected real estate scholar, and he has a book called The Language of Real Estate, and actually they kind of use this as the Bible for the real estate exam. It's a big book. You don't have to go out and buy it. But let's see what Mr. Riley says about a latent defect. Latent defects are hidden, keep this in mind, hidden structural defects known to the seller but not to the purchaser and not readily discoverable by an inspection. So let's just say your basement leaks in a certain area of the wall when you get heavy rains, and you're aware of that as a seller, but nobody else knows about that. And if a building inspector came down, he might not be able to spot that. There are some basements that leak without cracks or water comes up through the floor. So the seller or the broker, Carol, the seller or the broker who is aware of such defects, such as termite damage, a defective water heater, or a dangerous stairway behind a basement door, must disclose them to the prospective purchaser. Failure to disclose such information could be misrepresentation and grounds for the buyer to rescind the contract. So your question actually is, how is that disclosed to the buyer? You need to disclose that, and you need to disclose that in writing. Now today you will use what is called a seller's disclosure, and that's where that should be disclosed. And I always tell sellers, my sellers, if there's something you know about, put it on there, because you don't want to hide anything. You want to be honest about everything. So great question. Teresa asks, do you have to be obedient in pricing if the principal wants a higher price than what you think is appropriate? So that's a good question too. You have to be obedient in letting them know what you feel the house is worth. And sometimes that might cost you a listing, Teresa. Just down the street from me, and I was talking to some folks tonight at dinner. We had a church fellowship and I had to leave quickly, but I was talking to some people at the table there, and I said, there's a mini farm down the street from me, and I wanted to get that listing so bad, and I really prepared the best report, and I told them I thought it was worth around $379,000. Well, they listed with another broker for $650,000. I'm like, okay. 3 years later, and I did try to go back in to get the listing, but come to find out the other agent who got the listing, she was friends with the daughter. This was in a trust. 3 years later, I kid you not, it sold the other day for $379,000. I told them they needed to keep it between $350,000 and $400,000, preferably just under $400,000. The house sat there for 3 years. But to answer your question, I think you have to be obedient in telling them what you think the price, what the property you think it's worth. But if they want to go at a higher price, there's nothing wrong with taking that listing and being obedient to take the listing for them. You just want to pitch your story to say, look, if we take it at that higher price, I'd love for you to consider signing a price reduction to go into effect in 30 days or in 60 days. I had an agent who worked for me, Jackie, and she was brilliant in that respect. So every 30 days, she had an automatic price reduction that went into effect, and Jackie sold a ton of properties like that. But that's the way I work now. If a property's not moving or selling, I want to try to get a price reduction as well. So good question there. And Krista says, what about when you are a buyer and a seller's agent? Is there someone that you are supposed to be more loyal to? What about when you are a buyer and a seller's agent? Okay, so you are a disclosed dual agent. Very good. Well, in that case, and we get into state-to-state specifics, okay? In Missouri, and I'm just going to tell you how Missouri works as a disclosed dual agent. You have a fiduciary obligation to both parties, but the law says that you cannot give confidential information. So the way I pitch that when I'm working with a buyer and a seller, and I say, now look, I'm going to be representing both you and the other party. Don't panic or worry about anything, because it allows me to still work as an agent for both of you. But if you give me confidential information, I cannot disclose it to the other party. So, for example, Mr. and Mrs. Buyer, if the seller tells me to make a counteroffer back to you, but that they would accept your offer if you won't take the counteroffer, I couldn't tell you that because it's confidential information, and vice versa. So any confidential information has to remain confidential. And you could see that on the test. The other thing you could see on the test regarding that is what happens if, Krista, you have a house listed and you have a contract on it, and it's quite a bit less than what they listed it for, and the contract falls through and the deal goes south, and so you don't sell the house, and the sellers are mad at you because they think it's your fault, which it's not, but sometimes that happens, and the listing expires and they go list it with another company. Now, Krista, a buyer comes to you and wants to look at that house. Can you disclose to that buyer, since you are now a buyer's agent, what the offer was that you knew about when you had the property listed? The answer is no, okay? And you may see that question, that scenario of a question on the exam. So again, to recap, Krista has a house listed. She has a low offer come in, the sellers accept it, the contract falls apart, buyers can't get financing. Krista's sellers are mad at her. The listing expires and they go list it with another agent. Krista's like, I didn't do anything wrong. They couldn't get their financing. You know, whatever the deal was, those things happen. Maybe they had an inspection done. They didn't like the inspection, so they backed out of the deal. Needless to say, it all happens around the time the listing expires, Krista, and that's what happens in the real world. And so now they go list with an agency across town, and you're bummed out. But then you get a buyer who wants to look at it, and you are a buyer's agent with the buyers. Can you disclose to your buyer's agent, or are you supposed to disclose to your buyer's agent under that fiduciary obligation what that previous offer was when you had the property listed that didn't go through? And the answer is no. Even though you knew they accepted that offer at that price, you cannot disclose it. So if you work for both the buyer and the seller, you can't disclose confidential information, any confidential information, okay? But you still have to follow all those other fiduciary duties. So great, thanks for the questions. Makes it a little bit more fun in that respect. Okay, let's continue on here. So I know there's a lot of information on this slide, but listings should specify the sales price, commission. Now here's what they like to ask you for the test, and this I'm just going to pull these things out. By the way, I'm working on a new study course that I'll be providing, and I'll give you a sneak peek of that, because what I'm trying to do is go through and pull the important things out. So what may you see on the exam from this specific slide? All listings have to have a definite expiration date, okay? They love to ask that question. So you got to have a definite expiration date. The other thing that I've seen from this is that thing called a safety clause or a protective period clause. A safety clause is a clause that's in the listing that says, it might be kind of fun. Why not? It's our night and we're studying for the real estate test, correct? Let me show you this here and make more sense. I'll open a new form here, and here is the safety clause right here. And I always have my agents put 90 days in there. So if we read this, and of course this is, let's say we're going to charge 6%. So if a ready, willing, and able buyer is procured by realtor, its affiliated licensee, owner, or any other broker or person during the listing period, then the owner shall pay the realtor 6% of sales price or specific dollar amount as compensation due. Now here's the safety clause for the services rendered. Such compensation shall also be paid if the property is exchanged, optioned, sold, conveyed, or otherwise transferred within 90 days after the listing period, provided, this is the key, provided, I lost my place, owner has received notice in writing, including the name of the prospective buyers before or upon expiration of the listing period. It is understood and agreed that realtor presentation of an offer during the listing period shall constitute notice with respect to the prospects identified thereon. Then it goes on to say that if you list it with someone else, it voids that whole protective period clause. Now, what are we talking about here with the safety clause or the protective period clause? And you might see it. It just means this. If I have your house listed and I've shown it to 4 different people during the listing period. I have to register those names with you, and you would have to wait 90 days to sell it to any of those 4 people. Okay? After 90 days, you can sell it to them. But if you sell it to one of those 4 people during the 90 days, you owe me a commission. Just the people I've shown it to. Now, if you list it with another real estate company, then that voids the protective period clause, safety clause. So you might see that. You're going to see definite expiration date. Really, those are the only 2 things that I've seen. You're going to need signatures of all the owners, but they like to pull that definite expiration date. You can't have automatic extensions. And I've seen some things on the protective period clause. So just remember, those could be things they're going to pull from this specific piece. They also like the question about the salesperson leaving. Now here's where I talk about buyer's agency agreements. Gonna carry the same weight. It's the same as a listing agreement. It's just between the buyer. Again, definite expiration date, and you need to have the type property that they're looking for as well as a beginning date. Okay, and then we talk about listings cannot be transferred to another broker unless you have everybody's permission in writing. Therefore, if your broker sells the office, normally you can't transfer the listings as well. Okay, I'm going to go to this question here and take a look at this. The primary purpose of the listing agreement is it to serve as a guide for a sales contract, disclose defects in the property, list all improvements and amenities of the property, or serve as a contract of employment between the owner and the broker. Well, this is not true. Disclosed defects, that's the seller's disclosure. List all improvements and amenities of the property, that would just be more the marketing piece. So it serves as a contract of employment between the owner and the seller. Let me go back to that. Owner and the broker. I thought that said, I wanted to make sure that was correct. Okay. Now, a broker and a seller signed a standard listing agreement. Under the terms of the listing, the broker would do all of the following except, they don't like a lot of these questions anymore, which is good. These can get confusing sometimes. Prepare data sheets with information about the property. Prepare the documents necessary to close the sale. Sell, trade, or convey title. Attempt to find a ready, willing, and able buyer for the property. A broker and a seller signed a standard listing agreement. Under the terms of the listing, the broker would do all of the following except, would they prepare the data sheet with information about the property? Sure, they would. Would they prepare the documents necessary to close the sale? That's tough. Would they sell, trade, or convey title? Attempt to find a ready, willing, and able buyer. I know they would do that. So now we're like, prepare the documents necessary to close the sale, or sell, trade, or convey. And they would not sell, trade, or convey because that would require their signature, and that would not be required. Okay? Good. So there are 4 types of listing agreements. I am downstairs in my basement, and I have a heater over here. Well, this is my office actually that I work down here, and I have a green screen area back there. You can see where I do some of my recording, and well, actually I didn't have that I didn't have that going. I thought maybe I had turned that on, but I'll stay right there where I'm at. Anyway, over there, but I have a heater over here, and I realized I should have turned that heater off before I started tonight, because it's like getting really warm over here because I've got the door shut over there. So there are 4 types of listing agreements that we're going to look at on the next couple of pages here. And so the first one's called an open listing agreement. And an open listing agreement is a listing agreement that is between the broker and several different listing offices. So I'm going to draw this out for us as soon as my code comes up. You will see some of these questions on the test, so this is going to be very good. Open listing. Let's talk about this. Here's the seller under an open listing agreement. Now, they can give an open listing to broker A, to broker B, to broker C, and to broker D. Again, we're talking about an open listing. Well, whoever sells the property keeps the money. So if B sells the property, B gets to keep the money. If C sells the property, C keeps the money. So B would be left out of the code. If the seller sells the property, the seller keeps the money. They don't have to pay anyone. So what if, oh golly, I'm talking away and I forgot to, there we go. Now you should be able to see it. I'm sorry about that. It's been a long day, and I'm doing the directing, the teaching, and everything else, and I forgot to put that on there. But hopefully you can see. Let's just do this again so you see. My apologies. So here's a seller, and this is an open listing agreement. And they can give an open listing agreement to various parties. A, broker B, broker C, broker D. And what I was explaining there is that if B sells it, they get to keep the commission. Everybody else is out in the code. If C sells it, they keep the commission. See how that works? Now, what if the seller sells it? Then the seller gets to keep the commission. So it's a very, very limited or risky type of an agreement, because you're taking a listing agreement, and you very well may not even be able to sell the property. Now, why is this a problem? Well, first of all, most multiple listing services will not allow you to put the listing in the MLS if it's an open listing agreement. The second problem you have is you might do advertising on that property, and someone may want to drive over and drive by the property. The seller could be out in the yard. They stop and they say, yeah, we were driving by, we heard your house was for sale. And the seller says, hey, I've got one of those listings where I can sell it on my own and don't have to pay a commission. Or what if I quote the buyer $100,000, they drive over and the seller's out in the yard and it says for sale by owner, and they go up and say, we thought this was listed with John Mayfield, how much are you asking for? And he or she says, oh, we're only asking $85,000, and they're thinking, Mayfield told us 100 and you're telling us 85. Yeah, I don't have to go through Mayfield, I've got an open listing. You see how those kinds of, it's very, very tough. And a lot of times I just tell clients that it's not fair for me to take an exclusive right to sell listing with all of my other clients and then put a lot of energy and effort into your property as an open listing. they're trusting me wholeheartedly with their property. And so I just don't take an open listing. It's not very good to do. So hopefully that makes sense on how we do that there, okay? Now, the next type of listing we're going to look at is called an exclusive agency. So with an exclusive agency, the seller can give A, B, and C. Well, let me back up. It's my bad. The seller gives A an exclusive agency, okay? So A is the exclusive broker or agent. So it doesn't matter if B, C, D, E, or F, or whoever else, really doesn't matter who sells it. If B's the one that sells it, A still gets the commission. And of course, A would then share part of the commission with B. But with an exclusive agency, if the seller sells it, he or she does not have to pay any money to the broker, and so there again the broker could lose out. And just like I explained to you earlier, the problem we run into in these situations is a lot of times you tell someone about a listing you have, and if you have an open listing or an exclusive agency, lots of times the sellers may be quoting a lower price than what you are, because they will give you an exclusive agency or an open listing, but they want you to add your commission on top what they want to net. So you're out there quoting people $100,000, I'm just using this as an example, and the seller is saying, I only want $90,000. And let's face it, how many times do you tell someone about a property and they want to drive by it first? And if they drive by slow 2 or 3 times and the seller's out cutting the grass or shoveling the snow or whatever else, and they see you drive by, they may stop to ask you questions. And then all of a sudden, the seller and the buyer are friends. They invite him in the house. They let him look around. And then they sell the house to this person. And how can you prove you were the procuring cause of the sale? It's going to be very challenging for you to do that and maybe cost a lot of legal money. And so what you need to take away from this is that open listings and exclusive agencies are a little more, there's more risk involved. And the seller can actually sell the house and not pay a commission. Now, don't forget, with an open listing, whoever sells it gets the money, whether it's another broker or the seller. Whoever sells it keeps the money. With an exclusive agency, any broker who sells it, the exclusive broker keeps the money. But if the seller sells it, they keep the money. Now, I've seen questions on exclusive agency, and we'll probably have one and we'll go over here in a minute. And so the best type listing you can take is the exclusive right to sell. Okay? With exclusive right to sell, doesn't matter. Seller gives it to A, broker A. It doesn't matter if the seller sells it or any of these other brokers down here. A's going to get the money regardless. Best type of listing agreement you can get right there. Okay? So keep that in mind. You will definitely see that. So there's the open. Whoever sells the property keeps the commission. Exclusive agency, we just talked about that, and exclusive right to sell. Now let's go through a couple of questions here. So the first one, Dole is interested in selling his house as quickly as possible and believes the best way to do this is to have several brokers compete against each other for the commissions, what they like to do in France. The listing agreements with the 4 different brokers specifically promise that if one of them finds a buyer for Dole's property, Dole will be obligated to pay a commission to that broker only. What type of agreement has Dole entered into? So he's giving all 4 of them, and it's unilateral because it's an open listing. Discharged because it's illegal to have more than one broker. Executed if it's in writing. Bilateral because all listings are bilateral. That's a tough question. I can't remember the answer to it. I'm thinking this one because it's open and it is correct. I wish the storyline would put these answers down in the bottom, and that's a feature they really need because now you can't see these, but I do give feedback if you missed it, but sometimes you'd like to read it, and anyway, that's a technical thing that's out of my control, but I will request that in a future upgrade. Jim signs a listing agreement with broker Bob. Broker Lisa procures a buyer for the property, and Bob does not receive any commission. Bob does not sue Jim, even though Lisa was compensated by Jim. Which of the following best describes the listing agreement between Jim and Bob? These are the type of questions that you have to read a second and third time. They're just challenging. So Jim signs a listing agreement with broker Bob. Broker Lisa procures a buyer for the property, and Bob does not receive any commission. Bob does not sue Jim, even though Lisa was compensated by Jim. Which of the following best describes a listing agreement between Jim and Bob? Well, it would have to be an open listing, wouldn't it? I hope that's right. It has to be, because if Bob didn't sue Jim and he didn't get compensated and Jim compensated Lisa, Lisa had an open listing and so did Bob. So open listing. That's how we'll ask these questions. These are very good for you. A broker had an exclusive right to sell listing which expires in 30 days. The seller calls another firm to list the property. How should the second broker respond? They love this question on the test. And immediately list the property and tell the seller all brokers share commissions? No. List the property the day after the expiration date and tell the other broker his listing would not be renewed? List the property effective after the expiration of the current listing and wait until then to give service? That looks right. Immediately list the property and tell the seller all brokers work together. So the answer is list the property to go in effect the day after the listing expires and start servicing it the minute your listing goes into play. Here's something you need to understand. You cannot go, we call it going behind the sign or going around the sign. You can't go and procure a listing from someone. But if you run into them and they say, hey, Krista, I really am tired of, I've got my house listed with XYZ Realty. They haven't done a good job. It expires February the 4th, and I want to list it with you as soon as it expires. If they get into that conversation with you, Krista, you need to say, hey, let's go on and sign the listing agreement today, and I'll date it to go into effect February 5th. They can sign everything, and you just keep it in your folder, and then on the 5th, provided they haven't re-extended with the other broker, I mean, they haven't done that or they don't have a contract, then your listing could go into effect as of the 5th, okay? So that is the answer, and you very well could see a question like that. Net listings are illegal in Missouri. And a net listing is where the seller says to you, I want $100,000, and anything you can get over that, you can keep it yourself. That's illegal, and you can't do that. So you always have to have a specific commission rate. And remember, commissions are negotiable. So if you charge 10% or 20%, commissions are negotiable. You could charge 1%. Commissions are always negotiable. You'll see that on the exam, and they will tie that specific commission rate. You know, when we were talking about a definite expiration date and the protective period clause, you could also see a question about a specific commission rate. But just remember, commissions are negotiable, but you can't have a net listing. I have seen a lot of questions on that as well. Okay, I want to show you I was telling you about the new item I'm working on, and I'm going to see if we have any questions, and we'll probably wrap it up for tonight because it's 9:07. I just want to show you under completed. This is a brand new item I'm working on. It's called My Real Estate Exam Coach. It's going to have a totally different look and feel than what the main course looks like. And go back over here. Go to the home. This is kind of what it looks like. So this is just strictly a study aid. So this is where you would go in to study for the information. So as I've taken some of these, so I have to reload this page up. I'm still kind of beta testing. So this is going to be, we'll have lots of flip chart, flashcards with it. And you can take this on your phone. You can also, there's lots of videos with it. So all of the videos are there. There's also lots of audio that goes along with this, and you'll be able to go through. I am changing, and I'm adding a lot more. I'm adding a lot more video to this. I believe that's an improvement. Oh, I guess that's an economic characteristic of real estate. Area preference, heterogeneity, and mobility. Scarcity. So I got 6 of 7 cards right. But anyway, I think you'll really like it. It's going to be a lot of fun. As I mentioned, I'm going to have more short videos in here, but I'm really trying to go through each section and give you some information that's very helpful. And then as you get down toward the bottom, there's also a recap video here with my green screen. So, and then once you finish this, should go back down here, you would go over to a quiz, and the quizzes look a little bit differently. So again, still kind of in the testing phase here, and I have this kind of, it looks really great on a smartphone, but I'll be adding that. I've got several sections done and just a few more to go, and we'll be putting that in your dashboard. So again, it's more of a tool for you to recap after you've gone through specific modules. Okay, let me see if we got any more questions out here. I don't see any unless they're down below here. Okay, so let's do the pop out of the chat. I don't see any more questions, so that's all right. Anybody have anything they want to add? feel free to write those in. Hello, Bruce. I don't know if I said hi to you. Hopefully you're still on there. So I do not see any other questions now coming through. Wait just a minute because there's a little bit of a lag time from what I'm seeing and what. But hopefully this was helpful. I apologize. Next time I'll be sure and turn the heat off before I come down here. But I hope this was helpful. I hope you learned some things tonight. Please feel free to reach out to me anytime you have any questions. And just keep studying. The pass rates have been very good. Heard from a student yesterday who passed both parts. And of course, this will be on our YouTube channel, so you can watch it there as well. But thanks for your business. Thanks for your time. And hope you have a great day. Talk to you soon. Bye.